Hello. So our online lecture will be on tsunami, which follows volcanism in the course. And so one of the most notable recent tsunami is the December 26th, 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. So this tsunami, it occurred in the Indian Ocean, hitting many Asian and African shorelines, and was a very deadly disaster, killing over 245,000 people. And this was caused by the rupture of the subduction zone along the west coast of the island of Sumatra of Indonesia. And this fault along this subduction zone, it ruptured for over a length of 1,200 kilometers over the course of 7 minutes. So this is an extremely large earthquake. So this is the second largest earthquake with magnitude 9.2 in the last 100 years. And this subduction zone is where the Australian plate subducts under the Asian plate. So this extremely large earthquake triggered this tsunami, which washed all through the Indian Ocean, making landfall on many coastlines in southeastern Asia, which we know to be one of the regions of the Earth with the most significant natural hazards, where most natural disaster-related deaths occur. So this was the epicenter of the earthquake. So the fault ruptured up along this coastline. This is where the subduction zone is, and all of these shaded countries are countries that were affected by the tsunami. So that tsunami made landfall through all these countries and had some impact. This is aerial footage of the aftermath of that tsunami. You can see that the area is completely devastated. A more dramatic example of this is the regional capital of Indonesia, Banda Aceh. This aerial photo was taken prior to the December 26, 2004 tsunami, and this photo was taken after the December 26, 2004 tsunami. So you can see how devastating this tsunami was. So tsunami is a Japanese word. Tsu, harbor, and nami, waves. And being that tsunami is a Japanese word, we can safely assume that the Japanese are fairly well known, are fairly familiar with tsunami. So tsunami can reach great heights when they enter narrow waterways, such as harbors or river mouths. An 8-meter wave on the open coastline can increase to 30 meters in height in a narrow harbor, because as that water enters into a smaller container, the height of the water increases. An example, in 1896 in Japan, an offshore earthquake caused a tsunami that hit the coastline 20 minutes later. The highest waves were 29 meters high in these narrow inlets. It's extremely high. If you think about a meter is roughly 3 foot. So this is 30 meters. We're looking at maybe like 90 feet, probably more than 90 feet. And roughly every 10 foot is a story in a commercial building. So maybe like a 9-story tall building. Very, very, very tall waves. 27,000 people were killed in this particular tsunami. And tsunamis are not tidal waves. Okay, tidal waves actually do exist. The waves that are produced by flood and ebb currents associated with water moving in and out of tides. But that is not a tsunami. So calling a tsunami a tidal wave is a misnomer. Tsunami are most often triggered by earthquakes. And an earthquake triggers or causes a tsunami whenever there is a vertical displacement along the sea floor. Okay, so you have to have a dip-slip fault. So you have to have rock moving up or down. Okay, you cannot have a strike-slip fault where the rock only moves horizontally, because that doesn't displace any water. So vertical motion along a fault, dip-slip fault, that offsets a large mass of water, and that sudden movement, vertical movement of the seafloor, displacing that large volume of water, is what triggers the wave. And usually, where we have significant vertical motion along a fault are the very, very large dip-slip faults, which we find along subduction zones. So most tsunami that are triggered by earthquakes are triggered by those that occur along subduction zones. Most subduction zones are found along the edge of the Pacific Ocean, and so the Pacific Ocean is very prone to tsunami, though tsunami do occur in other ocean basins as a result of other phenomena besides earthquakes, and earthquakes along subduction zones that are found in those other ocean basins, such as the one that occurred in the Indian Ocean. So 70,000 people killed by 141 tsunami in the 20th century. And so the 20th century is basically all of the 1900s, where a single tsunami on the 26th of December 2004 killed about 245,000 people in 13 countries. That puts in kind of in perspective of how devastating that December 26th, 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was. It killed over double the amount of people that were killed by tsunami in the entirety of the century prior to this one. So this illustration shows how a dip-slip fault, so you have along a subduction zone, triggers tsunami. So you have the subducting plate subducting under the overriding plate. And what happens is these two plates are locked together by friction. Locked together by friction, and so they don't slide past one another, and as a result, this overriding plate deforms. Eventually, it's going to slip and rebound back up that way. Whenever it rebounds back up that way, it lifts all this water up, displaces all this water, which triggers the wave, which then flows in both directions. So you can see whenever this overriding plate moves up, it displaces this large volume of water, which creates a tsunami which travels in all directions. And so the 2011, March 11th, 2011, Japanese earthquake and tsunami occurred here, and it propagated throughout the Pacific Ocean. So this, I encourage you to go onto Blackboard and look at the PowerPoint, because this is an animation that demonstrates this process of an earthquake along a subduction zone and how it triggers a tsunami. So please, on Blackboard, look at these PowerPoint slides and click on this and open this hyperlink and watch this animation. So tsunami are different than waves caused by the wind. Okay. So wind waves, a single wave is the entire mass or water mass. The velocity of the wave, it depends on the period of the wave. Okay, for example, 17 mile per hour for a 5-second wave, a wave that has a period of 5 seconds, where a wave that has a period of 20 seconds, a longer period, so lower frequency, that travels at 70 miles per hour. So for wind waves, because they don't interact with the sea floor, their speed is strictly determined by the period or frequency of the wave. However, tsunami are very, very long wavelength waves, and because of that, they are influenced by the sea floor. And as a result, the speed at which a tsunami travels at is determined not by the period of the wave, but by the depth of the water. And so the velocity, v, here is equal to the square root, that's what this 1/2 power means, so v, the velocity of the wave, equals the square root of the acceleration due to gravity, which is a constant on Earth, it's 9.81 meters per second squared, times the depth of the water. And so we can see that as depth increases, the velocity increases. As depth decreases, the velocity decreases. So tsunami travel faster in deeper water and slower in shallower water. And so for the average depth of, say, the Pacific Ocean basin of 5,500 meters, that tsunami would have a velocity of 232 meters per second, which is 518 miles per hour. Actual observations of tsunami speed peak at about 420 to 480 miles per hour, but still, that is very fast. Okay, so tsunami can travel a lot of ground in the deep open ocean over a short period of time, but as the tsunami nears land and the water depth decreases, the wave will begin to slow down as it approaches shore. But as we learned, as the wave slows down, the wave height increases, because as the water depth decreases, the wave height increases. So a tsunami can have a height of 1 meter in the open ocean, but that can correspond to a height of 6 to 15 meters in shallow water, and even higher if it's in a narrow waterway like a harbor or a river mouth. The wave height is the leading edge of the sheet of water that flows on land for minutes. And tsunami is usually a series of crests, or a series of waves, so you have crests and troughs. And the period of the tsunami range between 10 to 60 minutes. So that means if there's a period of 10 minutes, that means that there's a new wave, a tsunami wave, washing inland every 10 minutes. The period of 60 minutes, we have a tsunami washing inland every 60 minutes. So what does the tsunami look like along the shoreline? It's not this gigantic version of a breaking wave that's sometimes depicted in the media. You know those waves that you see surfers riding? We don't see one of those large waves just coming ashore like you might see in San Andreas or 2012. What a tsunami actually appears like is as if the tide is coming in, so the water height is rising, but it's rising very, very rapidly, and it doesn't stop. The water height keeps on rising rapidly, and water just begins to flow inland. Just flow inland and more. It's almost like the sea just begins to flow out of the ocean onto land. And not always does a crest make landfall first. Sometimes the trough, the low part of the wave, can make landfall first. In that case, the water height, the water level, begins to decrease rapidly. So it looks like the low tide is coming in, but the water level begins to lower very rapidly, and it doesn't stop. And so it will expose parts of the seafloor that aren't normally exposed if a trough makes landfall first. So this is, kind of not what you expect to see with a tsunami. So we don't have these breaking waves like this, or even like this. Okay, so it's just as if the the tide is rapidly rising and the water keeps on flowing inland. Okay, so it's not this large crashing wave. All right, so an example of another example of earthquake causing a tsunami would be in Chile on August 8th, 1868. A large earthquake shook a town Arica in Bolivia, where several ships were moored in the harbor. So moored means tethered, basically to buoys. And eyewitness accounts of rising sea. And there was a second earthquake followed by a falling sea, then a massive second wave hours later, which carried two of those ships that were moored in the harbor miles inland. Another example is tsunami at Hilo, Hawaii, April 1st, 1946. There was a large earthquake in the Aleutian Islands along western Alaska, which created tsunami that traveled across the Pacific. Eyewitness accounts reported a large hissing sound with advancing and retreating waves for several minutes. Another example is the tsunami at Oahu, Hawaii, on March 9th, 1957, and you can see here the advancing and sheet of water. So here is the 1946 tsunami. So you see the water level there, and it's now washing inland. So now we're going to look at the wavelength and the period of the tsunami versus the height. So the destructive power of a tsunami is not strictly due to its height, but it's due to the momentum of the large mass of water with these ultra long wavelengths and periods. So momentum is the product of material's mass and its velocity. So like a Mack truck, a large tractor trailer moving at a high speed has a lot of momentum, where a small tiny smart car moving at the same speed has much less momentum. So the significant momentum of this large mass of water that's moving at an appreciable speed that is what makes it so destructive. Nothing can stand up to it. Everything is destroyed by it. Tsunami rushes inland for if you have a period of 60 minutes. So you have a crest that washes inland for about 30 minutes before the trough where the water begins to wash back out to sea for the next 30 minutes, and then it will repeat. So on this 60-minute cycle. So it washes in for 30 minutes, washes out for 30 minutes. So these long wavelengths and periods means the waves can refract or bend. Diffract, not refracted. Diffract and bend around islands and hit shores on all sides of an island. So even if you are on the shore of an island, on the back side of an island, on the opposite side of the island upon which the tsunami is approaching, you'll still be affected by the tsunami. And so here we can see this is from the 2011 Japanese tsunami, what started right here, and these lines right here represent the front of the wave at different time intervals. This is 1, 2, 3 hours, 4, 5, 6 hours, 7, 8, 9 hours, so forth. You see it took less than a day, less than 24 hours for that wave to travel diagonally across the largest ocean on the planet, the Pacific Ocean. You can also see that tsunami completely bent around islands such as New Zealand and Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, and so forth, and even larger islands like the continent of Australia. So just because you're on the opposite side of an island from the direction in which the tsunami is coming doesn't mean that you will not be influenced by it. So we're going to look at some of the causes of tsunami. Now we said that earthquakes are most common, but they're not the only cause of tsunami. Okay, a tsunami is caused basically by any sudden displacement of a large volume of water in the ocean. So when a water mass is hit with a massive jolt of energy, such as an earthquake, volcanoes, mass movements, which are landslides, or meteorite impacts, those all can trigger tsunamis. So the biggest tsunami are caused by the rarest events, which are impacts of asteroids and comets. As you can imagine, if an asteroid or comet, a large one, makes an impact in the ocean, that would cause an extremely large tsunami. So earthquake-caused tsunami are the most common. So we need vertical movement along the fault, as we mentioned, and so this is either the uplifting or downdropping of the seabed. And the earthquake has to be at least magnitude 7.5 to displace enough water to trigger an appreciable tsunami. And so tsunami warnings are, well, first you feel the earthquake, right? So if you live along a subduction zone and you feel an earthquake, that could have triggered a tsunami. If you see the sea level draw down significantly, that means that that's the trough of a tsunami and that the crust is following. Sometimes you can hear the wave coming. Some people say it sounds like a freight train moving in. And so if you have any of those warning signs, you should seek high ground immediately. Go upstairs in a well-built building. And hopefully, if you're in this area, there is a warning system. Okay, and so warning systems exist in several ocean basins on the planet. The first sensors were activated in 2013, and we have the Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu that operates for the warning system of the Pacific Ocean. So those warning systems can also give notice to people that there is a tsunami on its way. So some more examples of earthquake-caused tsunami. A very large one on April 1st, 1946. This is we mentioned this one in Hawaii a little while ago. So 2 large subductions on earthquakes in the Aleutian Islands shook this lighthouse, Scotch Gap Lighthouse, which was still reinforced concrete, at 14 meters above the low water level. So what that means is 14 meters of ground displacement. So the land lifted up 14 meters during the earthquake. 20 minutes after a second earthquake, a 30-meter high tsunami swept the lighthouse away. And so in this case, the first wave, the first crest, was the biggest of all the waves in the tsunami. And the tsunami traveled across the Pacific at about 485 miles per hour, slowing to about 35 miles per hour near Hilo, Hawaii, which we saw images of. Rushed ashore and killed 159 people in Hilo. Despite warnings, unfortunately this was April Fool's Day, and so the warning was not taken seriously by all the people. And the largest earthquake that has occurred in the last 100 years, on May 2nd, 1960, was a magnitude 9.5 subduction zone earthquake. That created a large tsunami, so 3 waves, each successively larger, hit the Chilean coast, killing 1,000 Chileans. There was adequate warning given in Hawaii, but 61 people were still killed. The tsunami continued across the Pacific to Japan, killing 185 people there. And this tsunami could continue to be measured in the Pacific Ocean for a week. That's how much the water was disturbed, that we were still seeing movement of the water besides just the normal tides and wind waves associated with that tsunami until a week afterwards. And in March 27th, 1964, a magnitude 9.2 earthquake killed 122 on a sparsely populated Alaskan coast. The tsunami hit Vancouver Island and then California. There was a series of waves in this tsunami, with the 5th one being the largest. And which wave in the series will be largest is not predictable. So it could be the first, it could be the last. So this was the 1964 Valdez, Alaska earthquake, and you can see this is the front of the tsunami at different hours. And this is the one in Chile, the 1960 Concepcion. You can see how it traveled across the Pacific. And this is the fault that ruptured in the earthquake, where this was uplift, so 30 feet uplift. That's what pushed all this water up here, up, triggering tsunami, and this was subsidence. Also helped trigger the tsunami. So here is the fault that ruptured to trigger the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. We talked about this earthquake. We were discussing earthquakes. And this was a megathrust earthquake, a very large dip-slip fault with a small dip angle, which we call thrust fault. So this whole segment of the fault ruptured. So we had uplift over here, and downlift over there, and that displaced the large volume of water, triggering the tsunami. And we talked about the large earthquake that will occur in the Pacific Northwest, and with that earthquake, most likely will come a tsunami. So, as we said, most killer tsunamis are generated by earthquakes along subduction zones, and all ocean basins have at least some short subduction zones. The Atlantic has the Puerto Rico Trench, and the Indian Ocean has the Indonesian subduction zone. And the Puerto Rico Trench actually had an earthquake In 1918, it triggered a tsunami. And in British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, those coastlines, they slipped in the 1909 earthquake in 1700, which generated a massive tsunami that was recorded in Japan and in the geological record in this coastline. And that tsunami was also recorded in the oral history of the Native American populations in this part of the country. The next event, the next magnitude 9 or above earthquake along the subduction zone will trigger a tsunami that will be very deadly along this coast. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake. It was a magnitude 9 subduction zone earthquake that triggered this tsunami. And this tsunami was very devastating for the coast of Japan, and also caused the meltdown of the Fukushima power plant, causing a nuclear disaster as well. This is a pretty dramatic video, which I suggest that you open this hyperlink and watch it on YouTube. It shows the water rushing in with the tsunami in this river mouth, and it kind of gives you an idea of what it's like when a tsunami hits landfall. Well, it's not a crashing wave, but just the water height rapidly increasing. So now we're going to look at some volcano-caused tsunami. We talked about Krakatau, which was now a caldera. We talked about volcanism. In 1883, this volcano, in between the islands of Sumatra and Java in Indonesia, it erupted, and when it erupted, it collapsed, forming the caldera. But during that collapse, it triggered a tsunami, and that tsunami washed ashore on the neighboring islands of Sumatra and Java, killing 36,000 people. So the tsunami was much more deadly than the actual volcanic eruption itself. Hawaii, it has these flank collapse where the sides of the volcano slide. There's kind of like these underwater landslides. And these underwater landslides, they can trigger tsunami. Okay, so these are all slumps or slides in these orange in the past, and each of these potentially could have triggered a tsunami, and this phenomenon occurring in the future can trigger tsunami as well. Then we have the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. These are caused by hotspot volcanism. And so 3 of the Canary Islands have had mega collapses. The last one was 15,000 years ago. The next mega collapse could send powerful tsunami to the coastlines of Africa, Europe, and North and South America. Models simulate a 10 to 20 meter tsunami across the Atlantic Ocean, and these flank collapses occur globally about every 10,000 years. So the threat of tsunami is on the radar here in the East Coast. A couple years ago, they wanted to test the tsunami warning system in the state of Connecticut, and by accident they actually issued a tsunami warning. So people woke up to a tsunami warning along the south coast of Connecticut, which was an error, but there are warning systems in place here in case this event like this, a flank collapse in Canary Islands or earthquake along the Puerto Rico Trench would occur and trigger a tsunami in the Atlantic Ocean. So sometimes earthquakes can cause landslides that then result in tsunamis. So in Newfoundland, Canada, in 1929, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake triggered a submarine mass movement or landslide that triggered a tsunami. The waves arrived at the coast of Newfoundland 2.5 hours later, and 3 pulses over the course of 30 minutes. And another example is in Papua New Guinea in 1998, an earthquake 20 kilometers offshore triggered underwater landslide that caused tsunami, which hit the coastline about 5 minutes later, washing 4 villages on barrier beaches into lagoons. So in rethinking the tsunami threat, we don't need always a very large earthquake to cause a tsunami. We could just have a large enough earthquake to cause an underwater landslide of large enough size to trigger a tsunami. In bays and lakes, in Lituya Bay in Alaska, 1958, there's largest historic wave run-up So this was triggered by a magnitude 8 earthquake on the Fairweather Fault, causing collapse of more than 900-meter rock and ice into the bay. So this landslide into the bay triggered the tsunami. 3 boats anchored in the bay were hit by a huge wall of water 30 meters high, traveling faster than 100 miles per hour. The crews of the boat survived, being lifted and dropped by the excuse me, by the wave remarkably, but the wave sent a surge of water 525 miles up the side of the bay. Here is a table of notable tsunami in recent times. So we have the date and the cause, the height, the site, and the number of deaths. And so you can see the most common cause is earthquakes, but you do see volcanic eruptions and subsea landslides in there as well. And the deadliest of them is this 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. So seiches, if you've heard of them, they're sometimes confused with tsunami, but what they are is there's oscillating waves in an enclosed body of water, like a sea, bay, lake, or swimming pool. And energy is usually, that creates these seiches is usually from very strong winds or earthquakes. And what it basically is water sloshing back and forth from a closed basin, just like water sloshing back and forth in a bathtub. So an example was this lake, Hebgen, lake in Montana, 1959, where 2 faults under lake shifted in these earthquakes, causing the seiche. And so there was eyewitness accounts of water migrating from one end of the lake to the other over 11.5 hours. Here's actually a tidal record in Lake Erie in Buffalo and Toledo. There was a large storm that passed by, and the wind drove the water to one side of the lake towards Buffalo, so the water height increased in Buffalo, but it dropped on the other side of the lake in Toledo, and then the water sloshed back and forth after that. So this water sloshing back and forth in the basin, causing a seiche. So, if you feel an earthquake, so mild shaking for more than 25 seconds could indicate that there was a powerful distant earthquake that may have triggered a tsunami. Obviously, this is only a risk of tsunami if this is along a coastline. So the sea might withdraw significantly or may rise before the first big wave, and the water might change character, looking a little bit more unsettled than usual and making unusual sounds. And so what you should do is abandon your belongings. That could slow you down if you're trying to save possessions. And so many lives are lost while trying to save possessions. Head for high ground and stay there. If there's no high ground nearby, then climb to the upper floor or roof of a very strong building. And if there's no sturdy buildings around, then climb a tree. And if there are no climbable trees, then grab onto something that floats. Look for something to use as a raft. You can see the level of desperation increasing as we go down there. So, a good case example of why education is so important: the closest inhabited land to the epicenter of the earthquake that triggered the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was the Semuele Island of Indonesia. After the shaking stopped, the residents fled uphill immediately. Only 7 out of the 75,000 inhabitants were killed because they had an oral history that reminded people that when the ground shakes, run to the hills before the giant waves arrive. So that knowledge of the threat of tsunami after an earthquake saved their lives, where that knowledge was not common along many of the coastal populations throughout the Indian Ocean basin. And if they did know that, they would save many more lives. That's why the Indian Ocean tsunami was so devastating, because they were not prepared for it. They did not know of that threat. In Nicaragua in 1992, the subduction zone earthquake shifted the ground very slowly, creating little ground shaking, but transmitting some amount of energy into the water and effectively or efficiently generating a tsunami. So that one kind of snuck up on them, and it's hard to have any warning if that is the case. So tsunami warnings, they take into account coastal maps. So there are these tsunami hazard maps of, say for example, the Hawaii Big Island based on local topography. So we have the coastal mapping of Indonesia, India, and Sri Lanka after 2004. Tsunami indicated where human activities increased the damage and loss of life. And so this is basically referring to the removal of vegetation and reefs. These natural barriers between land and the ocean increase the impact of the waves. So by humans altering the coastline, they've actually made themselves more vulnerable to tsunami. And there's also these buoys and pressure sensors out in the oceans that act as early detectors for tsunami. Before 2004, there was 6 buoy warning system in the Northern Pacific Ocean, and funding since has provided 32 more buoys around the world, transmitting information to scientists. And these will also have new tide gauge stations and seismometers along coastlines that monitor earthquakes and water levels to give some warning of tsunami. How these pressure sensors work is out in the open ocean, there's a sensor on the seafloor that measures water pressure, so the height of the water above it determines the pressure. So if a wave passes by, it will measure an enormously large water pressure, and then it telemeters, so it remotely sends that information through sound waves to a buoy. That buoy then, using radio waves, sends that information to a satellite, and that satellite then communicates with the Tsunami Warning Center, noting that there is an event that needs to be attention needs to be paid to, and if that event is determined to be a tsunami, then people are warned who are in harm's way. So that is our lecture on tsunami. I thank everyone for bearing with me this week and participating in this online lecture. We will meet next week at our normally scheduled time and location. Thank you very much.